Solomon was not only heir to David's kingdom, see Surah 27, ayat 16, but further widened it by conquests. Here too, it may be mentioned at the very outset that the Holy Quran rejects the charge of idol worship and other shirking from pure monotheism against Solomon, which the Bible prefers in plain words by asserting that the wives of Solomon turned away his heart after others that were considered to be gods. 1 Kings 11:4. The Quran disposes of this charge in very few words. Surah 2, 102 contains the words, "And Solomon disbelieved not, but the devils disbelieved." The Reverend T.K. Cheyenne shows in Encyclopedia Biblica that the Bible statement is incorrect, that Solomon had a number of wives, both Israelite and non-Israelite, is probable enough, but he did not make altars for all of them, nor did he himself combine the worship of his wives' entities, his wives' gods. You know, I'm throwing in the word considered to be God, who his wives considered to be gods, with that of Yahweh. The Quran, however, goes further than this, for it says that the Queen of Sheba did turn a believer in God. She said, 27:44 says, of Al-Quran says, she said, "My Lord, surely I have wronged myself, and I submit with Solomon to Allah, the Lord of the worlds." The longest notice of Solomon is that connected with his conquest of Sheba. It starts with the description of the immense resources of his kingdom. Surah 27, 16, and 17 says, "O men, we have been taught the speech of birds, and we have been granted of all things. Surely this is manifest grace." And his hosts of the jinn and the men and the birds were gathered to Solomon, and they were formed into groups. The use of birds in conveying messages made the birds a necessary adjunct to a military expedition, and the jinn were, no doubt, the hardy non-Israelite tribes subjugated to the Israelites. Well, doesn't have to say that either. That's a symbolic interpretation rather than the literal one. Elsewhere, they are spoken of as those who worked before him by the command of his Lord. Surah 34:12 and 34:13 says, "Made for him what he pleased of synagogues and images." Clearly, these were the foreigners who Solomon employed to build the temple, men skilled in architecture for the Arabs, as Tabrizi in his commentary on Himasa remarks, "Speak of the jinn frequently, likening a man who was clever in executing affairs to the jinni, and the shayateen are the devil. And the men employed by Solomon in this and similar services are elsewhere spoken of as devils." Well, people use the phrase. It doesn't mean that there can't be a spiritual reality. 37:38 says, "And the devils, every builder and diver, and others fettered in chains." The latter seem to be those who were forced into service, or they may have been prisoners of war. After Solomon sets out for the conquest of Sheba, he passes the valley of Naml, which should not be translated as the valley of the ants, for Naml, although meaning ants, is here used as a proper name, and Vad al-Naml, or the valley of the ants, Wad al-Naml, or the valley of the or the valley of Naml, is, according to Taj al-Arus, situated between Jibreen and Asqalon, and the Namla are plainly spoken of as a tribe in the Qamus, which says, "Abrika is of the waters of Nemla. This tribe, which is very likely intervened between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and formed like a buffer state, submitted to Solomon, and hence we find Solomon giving thanks to God. Surah 27, 8-19 says, My Lord, grant me that I may be grateful for thy favor, which thou hast bestowed on me and on my parents. A similar mistake is made in connection with Hudhud, who undoubtedly is mentioned as an officer of Solomon, but the word is misunderstood as meaning the lapwing. A similar name is Ben-Hadad, a king of Syria, 1 Kings 21, and the Arab writers speak of a king of Himyar as Hudad. The mistake arises from the fact that this name is mentioned in connection with the review of birds of 27:20, but the reason of this seems to be that the man so named was some officer of the intelligence department of Solomon's army that is related of him. In the 10 verses that follow shows him clearly to be a man and not a bird. For he brings to Solomon news about the Queen of Sheba, whom he finds along with her people. Surah 27:24 says, adoring the sun instead of Allah. Well, there's more to that verse, I believe. And doing many unrighteous things. And the devil made their deeds fair seeming to them, and thus turned them from the way. Okay, is that the rest of the verse, or is there something missing further? Only a man could judge what a false belief or wicked deed was. Well, here again, too. But an animal perhaps can make a judgment, but they don't have moral accountability like that. That's the difference between humans and other animals. I mean, humans are a type of animal, but the Queen of Sheba, at first, sends a present to Solomon, which he considers as an affront and threatens to attack her territory. She submits to Solomon and comes to him, and is asked to enter the palace, which shows that she became his wife. In the palace, water ran under glass, which the queen mistook for water itself. Well, yes and no, that doesn't necessarily mean that. The palace would receive foreign dignitaries and stuff, wouldn't it? Thus did Solomon make her realize her error in worshipping the sun, which is only an outward object, while the real sense, or the real source of life and power was God, whose hand, unseen by man, worked in these objects. It is then that the queen believes in God and gives up the worship of other objects. Solomon is again mentioned in connection with the destruction of the city of Sheba in chapter 34. Here we are told that the wind was made subservient to Solomon and made a month's journey in the morning and a month's journey in the evening, says Surah 34:12. In 21:81 the words are, and to Solomon we subdued the wind blowing violently, pursuing its course by his command to the land which we had blessed. The reference in both places is to Solomon's fleet, which ran between the Gulf of Aqaba and Ophir on the eastern coast of the Arabian Peninsula and brought him fabulous amounts of gold and tropical products, according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, giving him unlimited means for increasing the glory of his capital city and palace. This is referred to in what follows in Surah 34:12 and 13, the making to flow of a fountain of molten brass, and the making of fortresses and images and bowls and cooking pots. But with all this glory, Solomon's death was also the death knell of his kingdom, and his successor was only a creature of the earth that ate away his staff. 34:14 says that. The reference being to the life of ease and luxury which Rehoboam led. The eating away of the staff, indicating the destruction of his kingdom. Elsewhere we are told that Solomon's heir was a mere body. Surah 38:34. When Solomon saw this, he turned to God and prayed for a kingdom which should not be in danger of being wasted by others, the spiritual kingdom. We are also told that Solomon had at heart no attraction for the wealth and good things of this life. The incident mentioned in this connection has been sometimes misinterpreted. Surah 38, 33, 30, 38, 8, 30 to 33. And we gave to David Solomon, most excellent the servant. Surely he ever turned to Allah. When well-bred swift horses were brought to him at evening, so he said, I love the good things on account of the remembrance of my Lord. Until they were hidden behind the veil, he said, bring them to me. So he began to stroke their legs and necks. The incident is related to show that Solomon was a good horseman, and that a prophet can also be a good horseman. But under Jewish influence, in all probability, some commentators have turned it into a puerile story that Solomon was so occupied with the horses that he forgot to say prayers before sunset, and then began to cut off the legs and necks of the horses. There is no mention at all of any of these things in the Holy Quran. Now that's actually true. And the cutting off of the limbs and all that stuff, that's not legitimate either. But that Solomon might have missed a prayer in his life. There is narration that says that. And, you know, if he repented of it, what's the deal?